Imagine for a second, it's back to 2009. Global economy is only just starting to move past the worst effects of the greatest financial crisis in recent history. This leads to increased distrust in the government, and by proxy, leads to the creation of Bitcoin and the concept of cryptocurrency. The best game of all time, Prototype, gets released by Radical Entertainment. NASA launches Kepler, one of the most significant space telescopes in the history of space exploration, finding hundreds of exoplanets over the following decades. Marcus Notch Peterson creates the Cave game, an early tech test for a game that would end up becoming the best-selling video game of all time, later renamed to Minecraft. And most relevant for the story, inspired by hacker groups such as Anonymous coming to the forefront of the media, especially with events like the 2008 Anonymous War on the Church of Scientology, Ubisoft begins development of a hacking game. A citywide sandbox, a completely dynamic world filled with millions of people and tens of millions of artificial eyes. Following real-life laws of physics and rules of nature, but with a superpower, the ability to hack anything and everything at any time, control your environment, invade the privacy of others and learn all their secrets, steal untold amounts of money and become filthy rich, or simply cause chaos everywhere you go. An ideal paradise for hackers. The most next-gen game to ever exist. A GTA killer of epic scale and infinite depth that would destroy Rockstar's biggest achievement and show the world who the alpha dog of gaming is. Over the next few years, Ubisoft Montreal would slave away working on the title, until announcing it in 2012 with a gameplay trailer released in 2013. And what a trailer it was. Windswept streets, hyper-realistic dynamic city, filled with lifelike NPCs and all the atmosphere in the world. Rain especially was impressive beyond everything ever seen before, and appeared so realistic you felt wet just watching the screen. Every texture was detailed beyond belief. Every surface glistened like the most perfect mirror you've ever seen. Every square centimeter was stuffed with more polygons than all of GTA's ever. The hype for the game was unreal. Ubisoft even set up a promotional venue where they parked a van equipped with computers and so-called hack gear, and allowed real strangers to experience what it's like to hack anything and everything with a press of a button. Sure, those were paid actors and the whole stunt was faked, but the idea was alluring as hell. The power of absolute control at your fingertips. Absolute perfection. The hype for Watch Dogs was building, and fast. An opportunity to play God in a world that's similar to our own, with the same actions and interactions with characters you'd ever want to experience in real life, but without any of the consequences, featuring the most realistic graphics ever. Go anywhere, do anything, be anyone. Add to that a multiplayer component and the ability to cause chaos in this world with your friends, and you've got it. The best game ever. Everything you'd ever want from a virtual experience based on reality. Except it turned out to be a lie. What we got was maybe half of what was promised. Graphics downgraded, gameplay neutered, interaction with the world reduced to one button input. The world started out as hyper-realistic, turned out to be hyper-disappointing. Everything felt like a cheap bootleg version of what was promised. Everything failed to deliver. No stone left untouched. No aspect of Watch Dogs that remained true to the promise. But did it really fail? Was it really as terrible as everyone remembers? At the time, critics seemed to like it. Reviewers gave it above average or even high ratings. The game sold really well for a completely new and fresh property, eventually shipping over 10 million units. Even the players who actually played it for the most part didn't really hate it. So what's going on here? Why over a decade after release is Watch Dogs still remembered like a substandard game? Spoiler alert, because it's an absolute mess. There are so many shortcomings and downfalls that despite being just shy of 20 hours long for just the campaign, Watch Dogs still feels like a demo. It's a cacophony of ideas, concepts, and technologies that all seem to work well at first glance. But the second you interact with anything, the illusion of polish falls apart immediately. And there are a few very, very major issues in Watch Dogs that rob it of any chance at greatness. Since it's the first thing anyone will face when trying to play Watch Dogs, I'll just start here. Watch Dogs is so incredibly bad from technical side, it's actually hilarious. Check this out. This is me trying to launch it on a high-end 2024 computer. This system is light years ahead of anything available in 2014 and handles games like GTA 5, Crysis 3, and even hilariously outdated and unoptimized stuff like PlanetSide 2 on maximum settings with no issues. And despite all that, Watch Dogs crashes on launch 90% of the time. Am I running a cracked version? No. This is the latest build from the official Ubisoft Connect app. It's a legitimate bought copy I've had for a number of years now. It just shouldn't act like this. When it actually manages to load past the splash screen and into the actual game, it loads in a window, despite previously being set to full screen. So naturally, I go to change the setting to full screen again, but upon applying any change to settings, the game crashes and the whole load crash cycle starts again. Maybe I could understand that if the game was launching on some poverty spec computer from the ancient world, but this game is running on very recent Ryzen CPU with very respectable RTX graphics card, and it's installed on an NVMe SSD, not some ancient 5400 RPM hard drive. Sure, maybe this instability can be written off as systemic quirk. Maybe this particular computer just doesn't accept Watch Dogs. To test that theory, I tried running Watch Dogs on 2 more systems and got the exact same behavior. So it's not limited to just one system. It's an issue with the game itself. And if by some absolute miracle you manage to load into the game, don't think for a second your troubles are over. Watch Dogs is both buggy and unoptimized to oblivion. Despite very significant graphical and technological downgrades from what was shown in that E3 demo back in 2012, Watch Dogs still runs like hot garbage. Places like Reddit and Steam forums is full of people struggling to get Watch Dogs running at stable frame rates, even with ridiculously high-spec machines with stuff like RTX 4090s in them. And that's after more than a decade since release, and after presumably numerous patches to the game. Only God knows how people in 2014 were able to play it at all, on hardware multiple times less capable than what we have now. There are even videos from channels like Gamers Nexus discussing the widespread issues with Watch Dogs, the terrible performance, and numerous bugs. So the optimization and horrible performance has been an issue since day one, and not just on my system. If it was just bad optimization, maybe it wouldn't be that much of an issue. But considering all the hype Watch Dogs received, the fact it had 5 years of development time, had over 1,000 people working on it, and allegedly had a budget of $68 million makes the horrible performance a much harder pill to swallow. To put it into even more context, Grand Theft Auto 5, which by the time Watch Dogs released had been out for around 3 years, had a development budget of about $140 million. But where Watch Dogs had only about half the budget of GTA 5, it only features one protagonist, a map that's almost 4 times smaller and considerably less varied, a campaign that's almost twice as short, and a very rudimentary online component. GTA 5's map is significantly larger. It has 3 protagonists with the ability to switch between them at basically any time, very long and intricately detailed story mode, an online multiplayer that's even more detailed and much more deep than even the story, and it runs perfectly fine on systems significantly less powerful than those required by Watch Dogs. Not to mention all the additional features like fully fledged car customization and tuning that works both in single player and online, purchasable properties, businesses, and other stuff. To put into even more perspective, these are some of the other games that came out in 2014 that both looked insanely much more impressive and offered considerably better performance on the same systems. It's not even a case of slightly better graphics or more impressive lighting. It's visuals that are worlds apart from where Watch Dogs was at that time. Even games with significantly smaller budgets were much more optimized and looked significantly better. And even if one could argue it's not fair, since other games were flagship titles for their respective companies, so received much more care and polish, Ubisoft themselves put out Far Cry 4 at the end of that same year. And Far Cry 4, even to this very day, is still one of the most impressive and visually stunning games of all time. But even forgetting the graphics and performance issues, Watch Dogs is straight up buggy. Voice lines and calls repeat constantly, after every single side mission, fast travel, or after closing and reopening the game. And the only way to get rid of the repeated calls is to play the next campaign mission. And if there's a call after said mission, it will start to repeat again until you complete missions further. And that's like the least of the game's problems. Stuff like vehicle physics is insanely borked. Vehicles can disappear into freaking ether or something if you crash while driving them. Like seriously, you just crash and your motorcycle disappears into fucking 6th dimension or something, never to be seen again. You can teleport straight through walls and fences and other surfaces upon crashing into them, with vehicles either teleporting with you or staying behind, and it's completely unclear what it depends on. Combine it with really wonky physics, and you got a perfect fiesta of not knowing what the hell is going to happen when you hit a surface. And the bugs don't just apply to you or your vehicle. AI is pretty screwed up too. NPCs can scale buildings multiple times their height, apparently by just flying or hovering in the air or teleporting up or just grabbing invisible ledges with their mega long hands. I do have to give the game some credit though, as none of the bugs and glitches are game breaking. At no point in my 20-hour long playthrough did I softlock, was unable to progress, lost a mission or died because of a bug. It's just that bugs and glitches in a game of this budget, scale, and manpower shouldn't happen every 10 minutes. Although I do have a suspicion majority of the bugs and glitches are caused by the physics system, and if Ubisoft didn't try to reinvent the wheel here, a lot of bugs wouldn't even occur. The particular problems is with vehicle physics. It's just so damn weird how all the vehicles drive and control. Cars in particular are just wonky as hell. It's really hard to explain, and on footage it doesn't show up well, but it feels almost like cars are both too light and too heavy at the same time. When driving on straights, you do feel in control. Vehicles are responsive and have good grip, but the second you start to turn at speed, the car just loses like 95% of traction and slides into the near surface. It's pretty much impossible to turn without braking first, or using the focus ability to slow down time, which for some reason also gives vehicles increased traction. It's basically a carbon copy of Franklin's ability from GTA 5. But while regular cars are wonky, motorcycles is where the physics system gets beaten and buried. Motorcycles are a sight to behold. Usually they control somewhat well, somehow have even more grip than cars, which is probably not how it works in reality, but who cares by this point? They are insanely fast and agile, but the second you try to turn in focus mode, motorcycles become more twitchy than a lifelong crack addict in rehab. And the acceleration is nuts. I'm not an expert on the matter, but some motorcycles accelerate so insanely fast it feels like the driver should be turned into mush from the sheer G-forces. And their light weight combined with insane acceleration gives them literal moon gravity the moment you hit any kind of ramp. On certain occasions, you can soar through an entire football field worth of distance. But the most stupid part about motorcycles is the crash physics. It's completely unpredictable. Sometimes you can crash into something so hard you fly off the bike. Other times you can crash into things and be completely fine without taking any damage at all. Like, there's an implied speed difference between crashes, but at no point will you be so used to motorcycles that you will be able to determine the outcome of the crash. At numerous points, motorcycles will just go from what feels like hundreds of kilometers per hour to dead stop instantly, and it's never, ever predictable. I wouldn't call GTA 5's driving physics the gold standard for open-world sandbox games, but in GTA, driving is predictable, easy to pick up, fast to master, and every single second you spend in a vehicle, you know exactly how it drives, how it stops, and how much grip it has. In Watch Dogs, that's not the case. Only by like 10th hour of gameplay did I actually feel confident enough in my driving to not think about it. It's not helped by the fact the first 4 to 5 hours I spent driving without focus, because I didn't realize it worked in vehicles and the game either doesn't tell you that, or the hints are easy to miss. But once I got used to driving with focus, driving physics became much more manageable and in some situations even enjoyable. It's not a terrible system, but it just feels underdeveloped. Like despite 5 years of development, Watch Dogs needed like an extra 2 or 3 months to iron out the physics systems, but just didn't get that extra time. But I guess that's enough shitting on physics. We should probably discuss the reason everyone played Watch Dogs, the story. And obviously it includes a lot of spoilers. So if you don't want to hear it, you can skip to the time code on your screen or in the description. Continuing in 3, 2, 1. On many levels, the story is good, even excellent. But there are so many storytelling downfalls and design choices. It's almost infuriating how at times wasted and pointless it feels. The main campaign takes place in 2012 Chicago, the city of rain, wind, and the most sophisticated public surveillance system ever. Everyone everywhere is under constant monitoring. Every device is connected to a network, and the central operating system, or City OS, controls everything. It's in this environment we meet our hero, Aiden Pierce. He's a hacker, meaning he has skills to thrive in this hyper-connected world. And the first thing we see him do is siphon money from the pockets of people. He and his partner Damian Branks are pulling this noble get-rich-quick scheme, with Damian at the computer and Aiden in the field. Aiden specializes in social engineering. He's so-called human hacker. Meanwhile, Damian is a traditional hacker who breathes code and probably sees computer code in his dreams. Both of them make an effective team for these snatch and grab jobs. But the job goes tits up pretty fast, and their activity gets disturbed by a third party when another hacker joins the game. Damian lets his ego get in the way and wants to stay longer to combat this would-be threat, but Aiden books it out of there, ending the whole event. But they leave traces, and sometime later hunters pick up on them. While driving with his niece Lena, Aiden is tracked down by hired hitmen. They blow out the tires on the car and roll it, killing Lena and severely injuring Aiden. It takes several months for Aiden to recover after that crash, but now he's ready and eager to set out on a path of revenge. And that's the basic summary. The entire game from start to finish is just Aiden's bloody path of vengeance, punishing everyone who had a hand in Lena's death. Legions of people die, hundreds of families are left orphaned, the city suffers billions of dollars in damages. But Aiden is unrelenting. To be completely honest, for like a 20-hour-long main campaign, the story is pretty weak. Revenge plot works great for movies or even TV shows, and Ubisoft themselves even managed to pull it off in Assassin's Creed 2, but man, in Watch Dogs, it's just quite weak sauce. And the biggest problem with the story are its characters. For the entire game, the only real motivation Aiden has is getting revenge for the death of his niece. That's the only thing driving him, and it turns him from just a talented hacker into straight-up Punisher. He's the judge, jury, and executioner. Every single action he commits is done in the name of revenge. Every step brings him closer to vengeance. By itself, that's not inherently bad. There are plenty of characters in both games and movies who are either defined by vengeance as their sole character trait or become known for it. Alex Mercer from Prototype is a great example. He's basically pure vengeance incarnate, and he's great for it. Punisher is also a great example. A man on a path of revenge for the death of his family. Or even Max Payne, who is basically Rockstar's version of the Punisher. All those characters are compelling, they're interesting, and even if they're fundamentally flawed, there's still some connection built up between them and the audience that makes us care for them. They have at least some depth to them. There's at least some substance to them beyond their outer shells. But characters in Watch Dogs are different. There's a total of 12 characters that are somewhat important to the story. Out of them, 7 are main characters that get stuff done, and 5 are supporting side characters that exist just as an excuse for plot to happen. And with exception of exactly 3 characters, everyone is completely one note and generic as hell. Damian's only defining features are him being an egotistical sore loser and a complete dick to everyone. Raymond Kinney is sort of a technological redneck. good at drinking and hacking, but beyond that there's basically nothing to him. Default is a genius hacker who's out to mess with Aiden and Raymond. But in the main game, it's never even explained why he does it. And it's only in the DLC it's revealed Default holds a grudge against Raymond as he blames his hacking activities for the death of his brother. I mean, that is some sort of character build-up, but it's as weak as baby shit. Nicole is the most forgettable generic good person in any game ever. Her only role is to be a voice of reason for Aiden and a mother to Jackson. That is literally the full extent of her function. Jackson is a generic token child. It's sort of kind of implied he has like autism or something, but the game never goes as far as to state that directly. He's there just to give Aiden and Nicole something to do, because without him, they have exactly zero chemistry despite being siblings. Jordy's biggest and only character traits are him being a sarcastic dick and a professional hitman. He's sometimes almost funny, and he's definitely intelligent and very capable. But most of the time, he's just a dick to Aiden, his victims, and everyone else around, just in a slightly more polite way than Aiden himself is a dick to everyone. Lucky Quinn is the most by-the-book evil guy I think I have ever seen. He doesn't have a single redeeming feature. He's just completely and utterly evil. Mostly because without an actual bad guy, the story would have basically no point at all. Almost the same, just to a slightly lesser extent, applies to Iraq. He's bad to the bone, and the only difference between him and Quinn is that Quinn already got to a level of influence and power, while Iraq is just aspiring to get to that level. His cousin Bedbug is one of the 3 characters that have slightly more depth to them, but only just, and out of them all, Bedbug is the shallowest. He's not as bad as Iraq, but he aspires to be rich and powerful, but he is lazy, weak-willed, and easily influenceable. He's intimidated by Iraq, but whenever he feels even the tiniest bit in control, he himself is constantly intimidating and scaring others. And his singular redeeming trait is him being slightly more compassionate and empathetic to others. He does grow a tiny bit over the campaign, especially when Aiden gets involved, but his growth is nothing to write home about. The only other characters with any depth to them at all are Maurice and Clara. Clara is somewhat similar to Aiden, a god-tier hacker with impeccable technical skills and zero conscience. But unlike Aiden, she does actually change over the course of the story. She was the one that tracked Aiden and Damien down after that failed heist at the start of the story. It was her who provided information that led to the hit attempt on Aiden and the death of Lena. She does feel remorse and pity, and that's the reason she chose to help Aiden in his path of fury. She's a prime example of fucking around and finding out what happens when you screw up. Of all the characters in the entire game, she has the most character development, going from arrogant, untouchable god hacker to an empathetic but deeply guilt-ridden supporting character. She chose to assist Aiden even despite knowing full well he was dead set on a warpath to destroy everyone involved in the death of Lena, including her, even if Aiden didn't know it at the time he swore it. There are even several very faint hints that Claire has developed some romantic feelings towards Aiden, but that plot point is never expanded upon. Maurice is the other character with some depth, and knowing all the information about him, he is by a very long stretch the most human-like of all the characters. He is the hitman that carried out the attack on Aiden. He is the one that blew out the tires on the car and caused Lena to die. On the surface, it seems like he's your regular 2-bit bad guy, but there's a lot of evidence to the contrary. Scattered around the city are audio logs that reveal a lot of backstory for Maurice. And of all the stories in Watch Dogs, his story is by an insane margin the saddest and most depressing one. He grew up in the streets, got dragged into a life of crime he has been trying to escape with all his might. And in the darkness of his reality, he finally caught a glimpse of light. He got married to a woman named Abigail. It was his fresh start, his chance to start his life over. But the gangs just couldn't let him go. They dragged him back into the criminal underworld of Chicago. They put him on a job specifically designed to scare him. They set him up to fail. And once he did fail, he was indebted to them. His hit attempt on Aiden was his only option to pay off the debt, to leave behind the life he hated. The gangs left him with no choice, It was either Aiden's life or his. And he would have done it if not for Lena. His human nature and his conscience stopped him from shooting Aiden, so he instead shot at the tires of the van, causing it to roll. Lena died in the crash, but Aiden survived. Because the job was to kill Aiden, Maurice failed to do it, and for his failure, the gangs kidnapped his wife as payment and put her up into one of the human trafficking auctions of the Chicago underground. Depending on when you find the audio log, that fact might or might not have context. But in one of the story missions, Aiden has to infiltrate such an auction, so you get to witness firsthand what happens there, the way women are abducted, stripped of their lives, and turned into nothing more than drugged up cattle with a single purpose: to be sold to the highest bidder. Maurice was already tortured by his own conscience for the death of Lena, maybe even more than Aiden himself. But while Aiden still had revenge as a goal to live for, the kidnapping of Abigail took away Maurice's entire reason for his existence. He was left a husk of his former self, nearly soulless body consumed by regrets and burned by his own conscience. He was already living in hell before Aiden even got to him, but once he was captured, his existence only worsened at the hands of Aiden and Jordy. He was beaten for information and held hostage by the pair, constantly threatened, and his death was always within the distance of one mood swing from Aiden away. His story is by a huge margin the most tragic of all the characters in the entire campaign. Maybe it's for this reason Maurice's fate is the only moral choice you have in the entire game. While there are many who fall before Aiden, there is never an option of choice. Iraq, Lucky Quinn, and Damien all eventually get dealt with, but while you get to pull the trigger on them, there is never an alternative to not to. There is always just one option presented: execution. Maurice is the sole exception to this. It's the first and only time you can choose: spare his life or end it. Put a bullet in his head or turn around and walk away into the darkness. But once you think about it, there's really no moral choice here. Executing him means completing Aiden's path of vengeance, but it also means releasing Maurice from all this hell he's living in. It's the end to his suffering. On the other hand, sparing him might be the first step Aiden takes towards developing a conscience of his own, but it also dooms Maurice to eternal suffering. His wife is kidnapped and will never be seen again. He doesn't even know if she's dead or alive. He has no hope left in his life and has absolutely nothing to live for. He's a known criminal, so he has no options of starting over again, and his own conscience and regrets are burning him from inside his brain. Life is a worse outcome for him than death would have been. $68 million spent on development, 1,000 people working on the project, and 5 years of labor, sweat, and blood. And the most interesting and compelling story comes from a side character that of all the major characters in the game appears in at the absolute least. That would be so hilarious if it wasn't so sad. So much wasted effort. So much time spent developing, marketing, and promoting characters that get outshined by a random side character who feels like he was the only character written by an actual writer, while everyone else feel like they're just robots going through human-like motions. And nowhere is all that wasted effort more apparent than in the main character himself, Aiden Pierce. Aiden is one of the most bland revenge characters ever. He goes through the motions of a typical Avenger. He walks the walk and talks the talk, but his character is just unlikable and impossible to care for. He's a true black hole of charisma. First and foremost, all the events that happen to him are directly his fault. There is a secondary plot in Watch Dogs about the mafia and them blackmailing the city mayor. And that's the true inciting incident for the entire story and the real reason behind why Aiden and Damien were targeted. But it's 100% purely Aiden's fault that what happens to him happens. Stealing from the rich is how he gets involved in all of this. And it's not like he's stealing for a noble cause. He's just siphoning money for himself. There's absolutely nothing noble about him or his actions. And while Aiden does acknowledge the fact he got into this entire mess because of his own actions, he never lets that change him beyond putting him on the path of vengeance. He never stops to think that what he's doing is maybe wrong. Maybe it's not the best way to do things. And even when other characters like Nikki try to be a voice of reason, he just ignores them and carries on doing his thing. He is incredibly smart insanely capable, and if he really put his mind into it, he could do a tremendous amount of good for the world, but everything he does is purely for his own interest. Almost every action committed by him is executed with the express intention of advancing his own agenda and nothing more. Whatever good or bad comes out of his actions is a side effect of his efforts, but never the main goal. Nikki and Jax are the only characters in the story he cares about, and while one could argue by the end he starts to care about Clara, by the time he does it's already too late. And his moral compass is insanely skewed. It's especially noticeable in side missions. One moment he's chasing down and beating up a pickpocket, but after like 15 seconds he's walking down the street, siphoning tens of thousands of dollars from regular people without them even noticing. He's fighting against the Bloom and City OS because they are invading people's privacy and are collecting massive amounts of data. But one of the abilities he has is hacking into people's phones and cameras and stealing their data or watching them through camera streams. He's constantly thinking about taking revenge for the death of Lena, but he comes to her grave all giggly and smiling and shit. He's avenging her death, but on his path, he destroys legions of people, never stopping for 1 second to consider how many families are losing their husbands and fathers, how many children are left orphaned because of his actions. Aiden never stops to consider the circumstances. He never thinks about someone's situation or reasons for their actions. There is no gray area in his world. There is no maybe. Everyone he meets is either good or bad, with no in-between. And this applies to almost everyone. The only exceptions are Maurice, Nikki, and Jax. Jax and Nikki are the default force of good in his life, but that force is so weak, it barely even exists. Even on those rare occasions, Aiden reflects on how his actions affect his family. He doesn't change, he doesn't adjust. He's like Rorschach from Watchmen, never compromising, not even in the face of Armageddon. And the duality of his character is especially noticeable in his interactions with others. While he's acting like a human in presence of Jax or Nikki, he's a complete and total dick to everyone else. Despite Jordy being his partner and helping him whenever Aiden needs it, he's a complete dick towards him. Whenever Jordy needs help, Aiden either scoffs, refuses to help outright, or just ignores Jordy's request entirely. In fact, despite Jordy babysitting Maurice for the entire game, supplying Aiden with equipment, and helping him out in tough situations with his sniping, there's only one occasion in the story where Aiden actually helps Jordy with his task. And even then, it's only because Jordy left him literally no other choice. But aside from that one unique occasion, every single other time Aiden is just a massive goddamn bell-end towards Jordy, Damien, and everyone else. He gets physical in an attempt to intimidate Clara 2 seconds after meeting her. He chases down and intimidates Tobias just to gain access to Bunker for his own needs after his room at the motel got blown up. He blackmails Bedbug in a completely open and public place, knowing full well there's a bunch of people around, and the word might get to Iraq almost immediately, making him kill Bedbug before he is of any use at all. At the end of the game, Aiden knocks out power to the entire city just to find out where Damien is, not thinking even for 2 seconds about all the chaos, death, and panic this action will cause. Aiden gambles with people's lives constantly and without a single moment of reflection about his actions. A few times in my playthrough, I caught myself having a thought that a lot of anger and rage others aim at Aiden is completely justified purely by the fact Aiden is a total jackass. At the end of the game, Aiden has some pretty funny things to say.
Thought I could fix the little girl's death, but instead it led to all of this. Exposed lies, corrupted kings, a broken city. And me, changed man. I don't look back anymore. I don't regret. I look forward. Everything is connected. And I'll use that to expose, to protect, and if necessary, to punish.
I was laughing my ass off during that part. Expose lies? Sure. Corrupted kings? Absolutely. Broken city? Definitely. But a changed man? No fucking way. Aiden from the end is exactly the same as Aiden from the beginning, except he had his revenge and has considerably more equipment and skills available to him to cause chaos and destruction. At no point in the game does he change or evolve. He started out as murderous avenger on a path of revenge and ended up as a vigilante with hundreds of bodies behind him and thousands of skeletons in the closet. The entire game was nothing but Aiden exposing and punishing everyone and everything, be they directly related to him or just random, sometimes almost neutral people. In some aspects, Aiden is similar to Max Payne, just simpler and shallower. He's like a twisted version of Max, like Ubisoft wanted their Max Payne, but just couldn't get there. Max is equally as ruthless. He also destroys all obstacles and eliminates all the opponents without thinking too much about it. He is a deeply violent man with thousands of names on his list of kills. He is quick to shoot and almost never hesitates to take a life. But at least he does self-reflect. He knows what kind of man he is. He's constantly fighting against his conscience, and he's filled with regrets for his actions. His dark, twisted sense of humor and his cynicism towards life are his ways of dealing with the fact he's not a good man, and the fact for most of his existence he's been a reaper of life. He is constantly fighting his inner demons. He's never at peace, and he's always being burned by the sins he's committed. But even through his darkest moments, he maintains his moral core. He demonstrates restraint when it comes to innocent bystanders. He feels deep regret when his actions lead to death of those who didn't wrong him. He never considers himself a hero, and he believes his actions should be punished. In fact, in some sense, he's even waiting for the punishment for all the sins he committed. Every waking moment he spends not taking life, he's suffering for lives already taken. His own conscience is eating him alive, driving him mad and angry. Aiden is not that. His conscience almost never touches his mind. He has no inner conflict. The only decisions he makes are who to eliminate and how to do it. He is violent by choice, while Max most of the time is violent because he has no other option. Aiden is like Max, but without any of the moral implications. He has almost no demons to fight. He's not tortured by the guilt for all the destruction caused by him directly to other people. If Max's inner world is as dark as the night and as deep as the ocean, Aiden's is as shallow as a puddle on a road after light rain and bright sunshine. Aside from the main character, there are more aspects in Watch Dogs that feel like a mix of Rockstar's best games. Gameplay is one of them. While initially it might seem like the only thing Watch Dogs and Max Payne have in common is cover-based third-person shooter action, in reality, there are more similarities than differences. Watch Dogs in gameplay feels like a mod for Max Payne 3, or maybe GTA 5. Similar movement, similar gun physics, similar ragdoll reactions. The biggest difference is in the feature list. While Max Payne 3 has slow motion dodges, more realistic weapons and damage, and GTA 5 has switching protagonists and an insanely wide arsenal of every kind of weapon you'd ever want. And in both of them, characters are tanky as hell. Watch Dogs has more fluid cover-to-cover movement, more grounded and more realistic combat. Shallower, but still wide arsenal and more limited slow motion, but with the added bonus of a superpower to hack. Although it's not exactly a superpower, I guess, it's more of a supplementary ability. But let's talk action first. Cover-based shooting is pretty damn good. And considering how fragile Aiden is, that's a good thing. While Max or characters from GTA have armor, large health bars, it can soak up shot after shot after shot. Aiden will go down if he catches just a few bullets. There are no med kits, there's no painkillers. All Aiden has is regenerating health and whatever cover he can find at a pinch. And while health does regenerate fairly quickly, death is never far away. Stick out from behind, cover for a single moment too long, and Aiden will go down like a popped balloon. Area of effect attacks like explosions can even down Aiden in a single event, so cover is of utmost importance. In terms of damage to player, Watch Dogs is much closer to reality than other cover shooters. But here also lies a compromise. High damage, low health, and abundance of cover with the added ability to hack portrays Watch Dogs as a stealth hacking game. And indeed, all the elements for stealth are there. Fast movement between covers, silent weapons, the ability to kill 97% of all enemies in the game with one well-placed headshot, every single area in the game having at least several hackable traps or objects to distract or destroy enemies. And the fact enemies are dumb as hell, relying on decades-old strategy of taking cover and periodically peeking out to shoot, exposing their heads to easy headshots. Like, what even is the point of the helmet most of the enemies wear when it doesn't protect your head at all? But this notion of Watch Dogs being a stealth hacking game is kind of wrong. Watch Dogs is not a stealth hacking cover shooter. Watch Dogs is an action-focused third-person sandbox with hacking elements. Stealth is always the easiest and the safest, but also the slowest and most boring way to play. When playing in stealth, the vast arsenal is completely underutilized. You only need the silenced pistol and sometimes the anti-material sniper rifle, because it's just the best solution for most of the problems. And most of the time, there isn't an obvious choice to go loud or go silent, like it is for example in GTA 5 heists. While in Watch Dogs, for the most part, you're free to complete the mission in whichever way you want, the game heavily pushes you towards stealth. There are several missions where Aiden has to be completely unseen, slipping in and out of the area stealthily, unheard and unrecognized. But the design of the game contradicts all that stealth. The arsenal is massive. You can carry like all the weapons at once. Enemies die to one headshot or few body shots from most weapons, and the explosions are always the best way to deal with any vehicle or a group of people. So the game wants you to be stealthy, but gives you all the tools not to be, and is actually more fun when not sneaking around. And even on those occasions where Watch Dogs pushes stealth hardcore, it just ends up in chaos anyway. A huge part of the game is dedicated towards infiltration of an enemy stronghold, and Aiden specifically says it is a fortress that would be stupid to storm alone. And yet, after like 10 hours of stealth, reconnaissance, preparation, and information gathering, Aiden ends up storming the stronghold alone. Literally one-man army, him versus an entire legion of gang members. But despite seemingly overwhelming resistance, it's not a big deal. It's not even that tough of a fight, especially considering how many more skirmishes Aiden has partaken in by that point. It feels like the game itself cannot decide whether it wants to be a Hitman-style infiltration simulator or a big-budget Michael Bay blockbuster with guns, violence, and explosion porn. I did spend the majority of the game sneaking around, taking people out with a silenced pistol, but only because I'm a total lunatic who enjoys being silent and stealthy, and at least in my mind it's how Watch Dogs was supposed to be played. But that is precisely the reason it took me 20 hours to beat on my playthrough without doing any side objectives aside from gang hideouts. And that's 20 hours with me rushing for the last 10 or so to get the game done faster. Because stealthing around all the time makes the game boring. Stealth is never a challenge. The limitations of AI and the godlike stats of the silent pistol make most fights a breeze. It does feel fun to be stealthy and tactical and destroy everyone with well-placed headshots, but it's only really fun for the first hour or so. By the third hour, it becomes painfully apparent this is the most effective and easiest way to play, and thus, every single encounter becomes the same. Infiltrate, hack camera, mark guards, pick them all off one by one, get to the objective in the mission, then repeat in the next mission 3 minutes later. The silent pistol is the only weapon you need for like 90% of the game. Headshots are always a one-hit kill and give lots of XP. It's absolutely silent, so even when they're like a meter away, enemies can never ever hear it. And it's like one of the first and cheapest weapon you get, so there's no reason not to use it in every situation all the time. It has literally no disadvantages. Combine it with the pretty generous slow motion you also have as one of your earliest unlocks, and it becomes the best weapon to use in every single gunfight, every time. The only enemies that don't go down to silenced pistol are the heavy armored enemies you only encounter in the last several missions, and vehicles. For heavy enemies, there's the 2-shot anti-material sniper that downs them in a single headshot, and for vehicles there's explosives and launchers that deal with them also in 1 shot or 1 detonation. It's always the most effective way to deal with said enemies, so 100% of the time, it's exactly what you're going to do. But the actual, real, tangible fun only starts when you enter Terminator mode. It's those moments when enemies are everywhere and know you're there. You've got plenty of explosives and ammunition and an arsenal of weapons. Cover is plentiful and the odds are stacked against you when the game truly comes alive. High-octane action-packed firefights is where Watch Dogs is the most enjoyable. When you feel like you've got the control of the situation, but only just. When there's still a chance for you to die, but you still feel like you've got the power. That's when the true joy starts. The more chaos, the more fun it gets. Cover gets much more important. There's an actual reason to start considering your position and the way you move, and when every move can be your last, the necessity for tactics combined with the high intensity of action and small amount of time to actually think turn Watch Dogs from a generic action shooter to a truly magnificent fiesta of destruction. One aspect that feels like it should enhance the fun and joy of Watch Dogs, but for the most part actually doesn't, is the hacking. This is the one feature. The one big selling point Ubisoft was pushing with Watch Dogs, the one aspect that was supposed to elevate the game above all others and make Ubisoft millions. And judging by how this video is already like 46.5 minutes long, and I'm only now getting to it, you probably can guess how hacking is. I'm not sure if disappointing is the right term, because it is there and it does work, but it doesn't feel important. Despite all the years of development, all the millions of dollars and tens of thousands of man-hours poured into it, hacking feels like an afterthought. Despite being the one feature that was extensively promoted during all those trailers and press events and publicity stunts, hacking is incredibly shallow. Basically, everything that was shown in those trailers is all that hacking is. A one button and one minigame interaction with the world. At its core, hacking consists of 2 parts, the profiler and the actual hacks. The profiler is just the ability Aiden has to gain information on almost anyone. It's the feature that creates those pop-ups on the screen, describing characters with a name, a few words about them and their income, and it shows the hackable objects. In story missions and side objectives, it's the thing that shows you your targets, and also shows the connections between objects like the paths between doors and their control panels. And it's tied to a single button. On PC, that's the Z key. That is the only interactivity the system has. Whenever driving, or walking around the city, or sneaking behind covers in enemy territory, you just mash Z like it owes you money. The profiler is a key ability, but man, is it shallow as hell. There's just nothing in it. NPC profiling is an interesting idea, but it's so inconsequential it's hard to even call it a gimmick, let alone a feature. In Watch Dogs, you don't care about 99% of the main characters, so why would you ever even care about information on randomly generated NPC characters? And it's not like there's some dynamic interaction to the information provided by the profiler. Every time the profiler displays info about a character, it just selects a random line among several hundred lines pre-written by developers. It's not obvious immediately, but after a few hours of gameplay, the information already starts to repeat, and it's all so boring it's just white noise you don't even pay attention to. Aside from characters and story missions and in side objectives, the information displayed has nothing to do with the actual NPC. If you see an NPC that engages in yoga, frequents online forums, or hacks computers abroad, it doesn't mean anything. That information doesn't reflect in any way on what the NPCs are doing or who they are. In fact, it's like a quantum superposition experiment. The information wasn't even there until you looked, and it disappears the second you stop looking, and the NPC leaves your sight, and it doesn't have any effect on anything ever. It's just pixels on the screen with absolute zero meaning. The ability to show connections between objects is slightly more convenient, but it's also barely important. All it does is just display an overlay of lines on a wall, showing you what is connected to what. You meant to trace the path to the source to operate it and open doors, connect to cameras, or invade servers. And in theory, it is helpful, but it's helpful in the same way as having an electric wheelchair is helpful as opposed to regular hand-powered wheelchair. Watch Dogs is linear. Almost every objective is easy to find and access, even without help. Sure, there are some that are a bit complicated, and the profiler actually makes them easier, but such interactions are very few and very, very far between. In reality, the connection indicators turn 12-second tasks into 10-second tasks. It is helpful, but it is also painfully obvious this feature was added when Ubisoft were scraping the bottom of the barrel of what exactly do they add to Profiler to make it less cheap and at least a tiny bit more interesting. The actual most important function it provides is stealing money from NPCs by hacking their phones and siphoning their funds, but that's only impressive in the first hour or so. By like the fourth campaign mission money is already almost pointless, as majority of weapons can be picked up from dead NPCs, and since most of the time you're using the silence pistol anyway, the only real expenses are ammunition and crafting components for bombs, none of which are expensive, and you're literally never struggling for money. So the novelty of being able to literally siphon money out of thin air wears off real fast. By like the 10th hour of the gameplay, hacking for money is ignored entirely, as you already have plenty of money but nothing to spend it on. There are no houses, no car customization or investment opportunities like there is in GTA, so beyond buying more ammo and sometimes new trench coats for Aiden, money is completely irrelevant. The actual hacking itself is slightly more involved, but it's also painfully boring and insanely shallow. It all boils down to a single button interaction. This time it's Q and sometimes a minigame. And there's just nothing of substance here either. Regular hacks are basically quick time events, like blowing up transformers to inflict damage or hacking traffic lights to cause car crashes. The only dynamic interaction you've got in these so-called hacks is timing them correctly to either kill an enemy or stop the vehicle. That is it. There's just not much to be done with the system. The other kinds of hacks are privacy invasions. During these, you have to find your way to the entry point, initiate a hack, and beat a minigame. Seriously, in 2014, after enormous developmental effort, the absolutely best way to display the hacking process that Ubisoft could come up with is a minor variation of the water flow minigame that we saw in the first BioShock 7 years earlier. To say it's disappointing is an understatement. It's just so boring and uninteresting it's crazy. Obviously, nobody expected for the actual real-world process of hacking something to be ported into Watch Dogs, but man, Ubisoft didn't even try. Even in GTA 5, hacking is much more involved and dynamic than this. And sure, hacking in that game is also quite boring, but at least it's something. Ubisoft had this mechanic with insane potential to be a complete game changer, but chose to do absolutely nothing with it. Even within the confines of being a fun gameplay element rather than dull scrolling through code as it is in real life, there still could have been some interactivity or skill involved. Imagine if the hacking mechanic was similar to Gears of War weapon reloads, where all hacks would have to be uploaded, but hitting a key at the correct time would allow them to be uploaded sooner, or missing that would make them upload slower. That simple change would still allow one button interaction for maximum simplicity, but would introduce at least a tiny bit of dynamic interaction and at least some sort of skill ceiling. Or if the hacking was actually based on unlockable skills. In base game, all that skills do is unlock more objects to hack and more energy to spend on hacks, but it doesn't change the process itself. But what if it did? What if hacking had stats like range, speed, severity, and so on? If you had to be within certain range to hack something, and hacking process would take certain amount of time and would only have a limited effect. Sure, at the start it would be boring, but as the game progressed and you got more experience and skill points, hacks could be initiated from a longer distance, would become faster, and the damage inflicted would change. What if level 1 hack could only disable cameras? Level 2 could knock out the electricity to an entire building, and level 3 could turn off several blocks around the object, disabling all electricity, enemy communications, police choppers, and everything else like the basic blackout does in the base game now. It would be so much more satisfying to actually progress through the game, and it would be a much more organic way to make Aiden more capable and more powerful. Because as he is now, he's just a god hacker from the very start, and he's not even special. Everyone is a god hacker. Iraq and Clara both are god hackers. T-Bone is supposedly a legendary super god hacker. Default is also allegedly an epic legendary super god hacker. And then there's Damien, the ultra mega super duper god hacker, who by the end of the game has the same abilities as Aiden and turns them against him. It just doesn't make sense how every other character you meet is a super duper hacker. When everyone's special, nobody is. Having hacking tied to some sort of skill tree would make it much more interesting and relatable, or maybe even have it tied to the characters themselves. Maybe certain characters would have certain methods or equipment that allowed them to be better hackers. During one cutscene, Default is revealed to have some highly custom equipment that nobody else has, definitely contributing to him being as good at hacks as he is. What if every character had something unique about them like that? And by meeting or defeating said characters, Aiden would gain access to their equipment or hacks and become a more powerful hacker that way. It would be much more satisfying to see the progression in the game actually reflect on Aiden's abilities beyond just the sheer amount of times he can hack in a certain amount of time. There's also another reason I bring up the skill-based hacking progression. Ubisoft actually made it, just not in the main game. In the additional game mode called Alone, Ubisoft created just that, a skill-based hacking. In this mode, Aiden is alone in the entire city, and Chicago is under cover of darkness. To dispel this darkness, Aiden has to evade robot sentries and get close to generators to hack and enable them. Only then light returns and darkness disappears, along with the robots. It's purely based on stealth, and it's where the Watch Dogs turns into a truly great hide and seek tactical game. And the skill tree contributes massively to it. There are two main updates to hacking: the hack speed and hack distance. Hack speed means you can hack considerably faster, meaning you spend less time exposed to danger, and the game is much faster and more dynamic. Higher hack range means you don't need to spend as much time trying to get close to the generator, and can hack for behind cover further away. Skill points are only awarded after you hack the generators and clear an area. It's simple, it's effective, and it works. As you progress from generator to generator, the difficulty increases. There are more enemies spawning and they're stronger, but you also get more powerful and more capable. It's a simple, easy to understand system that nonetheless makes you actually develop skills and feels progressive and enjoyable. The fact it's restricted to a game mode not that many even know about is so bizarre. Imagine if this system existed in the main game, or at least something similar to it. The character's progress would be so much more noticeable and satisfying, instead of being a god at the start and uber god at the end. The other part of hacking, privacy invasions, is also nothing to write home about. In theory, it's an awfully appealing concept. The ability to invade the personal lives of characters, learn their secrets, see things they don't want you to see, and gain knowledge they don't want you to have. It's enticing as hell, but this is yet another part of hacking that feels like a cheap gimmick to act onto an already cheap mechanic. Privacy invasion is meaningless. All that you do is hack a panel, solve a minigame, and for your troubles you get like 20-second long clip of NPCs doing something. Sitting by the window, snooping on neighbors, talking about buying sex dolls, or just engaging in intercourse. But all of it is completely meaningless. None of these NPCs ever appear in the game outside of these cutscenes. None of them interact with Aiden on any level, and at no point do you care even for 1 second about even a single one of them. There is absolutely no connection between you and the object of the invasion. So you don't care, they don't care, nobody cares about it. The lack of consequences and absolute lack of care about the NPCs is what really kills the system. If there was even a single shred of connection between the NPCs and Aiden, it would elevate the system to an interesting feature. But there is no connection. Like, ask yourself this. Is it more exciting to learn that your 6 out of 10 co-worker started OnlyFans? Or that an incredibly pretty supermodel on the other side of the planet that you've never seen, never heard about, and will never interact with has done the same? Sure, supermodel is prettier, but there already are millions of them on OnlyFans to the point where they just blur into a crowd of faceless, pointless picture posters. And you have no connection to either one of them. Meanwhile, your coworker is someone you have at least some care about. And even if you don't, there's still at least curiosity in her content. Well, every single privacy invasion in Watch Dogs is like that supermodel absolutely nobody cares about. There's like one single clip of Jordy cleaning up a crime scene during one of his jobs, and a few plot-related clips during certain missions where privacy invasion is the actual main mission objective. But that is the absolute extent of the system. Everything else is absolutely and completely unrelated to anything anywhere. Aiden never acts upon the information gained, mostly because the information is both meaningless and almost non-existent. NPCs simply do not exist beyond these clips. You have almost no clue where the action is taking place and can do nothing about it. It's such an incredible waste of a mechanic. You could remove it from the game entirely, and not a single element of gameplay would change. There's an astounding lack of vision for the system, especially considering what it could have been with just a second of care and inventive thinking. The bare bones of an amazing mechanic are all there. Imagine hacking into someone's computer, maybe learning they work in the government, but secretly visit satanic rituals and partake in human sacrifice. Imagine using that information to blackmail them, getting them to make certain actions that benefit you in the game, like reducing the amount of police in the streets or ignoring small crimes you commit. Or imagine a scenario where you're scrubbing through someone's private files and discover they run a slave trading organization. Imagine using the information you gain to infiltrate the organization and dismantle it from inside, where you could use the mechanic to actually plant evidence against characters. Imagine instead of fighting Iraq directly, you gathered evidence like audio logs and video files of Iraq killing people or causing damage. Then you hacked into his systems and planted the incriminating files there, then called the police on him and have them either arrest him or get into a shootout with him. The possibilities are truly endless. Everyone has secrets. Everyone hides stuff in the limelight. Everyone has skeletons in the closet. Privacy invasion easily could have been one of the most impressive systems ever made in a game. To Watch Dogs, it could have been what the Nemesis system is to Middle-earth games. In fact, the system has so much potential, you could build an entire game just with privacy invasions as the base idea. But now it's just a hindrance. Every time you encounter a privacy invasion, you just scowl, because privacy invasion means playing a boring-ass mini-game to get rewarded with a boring-ass video file about stuff that doesn't matter in the least that you absolutely don't care about. The only thing about hacking that actually makes sense is the whole mechanic being tied to control towers. Watch Dogs came out at the time where Ubisoft was obsessed with putting climbable towers, viewpoints, and synchronization points in every single goddamn game they made. It started with Assassin's Creed and continues in Watch Dogs. Except here it's at least believable. The map is divided into regions, and at the start of the game, Aiden can't use his hacks in most regions due to said region not being connected to the network. So climbing towers is a requirement in order to unlock the full map and the ability to use the profiler in said regions. But even here it's done in the simplest way possible. The only action you need to do is to actually get to the control box on the tower itself. It might involve hacking a few cameras, tracing a few paths, and unlocking a few doors, but 95% of the action is just climbing and running. You don't even get to hack the tower itself. Aiden just takes a picture of some barcodes on the back and connects the towers on his own. That is the extent of this mechanic. I mean, sure, it's simple and it works, and in the case of Watch Dogs specifically, it does make sense that disconnected areas aren't available for hacks, but it feels like a padding for time. The problem is that none of the towers are an actual challenge. No tower is guarded by enemies. There's never a chopper flying above to check for trespassers. There's no additional equipment required to access the tower. It's always a single, linear path, with doors being the only obstacle, and it all feels insanely artificial. The first tower you connect to is as easy as the last, the only difference being the time it takes to run through the obstacle course to get to it. Platforming is the only obstacle to unlock the tower, and with how linear it is, I'm not sure if it can even be called an obstacle. There's always just one singular correct path, and the second you stumble upon it, the next steps are impossible to miss. You're literally being handheld through the course. In total, there are 13 hackable city OS towers in the entire game. And how many of them are actually interesting? 3. One features a long but pretty enjoyable and interesting platforming on top of rooftops in some quite pretty building complex. One is cool because it's quite vertical, but in a somewhat confined space, so it creates a false sense of security. And one requires you to use a vehicle to jump the gap from a container that has to be hacked to move into a position. That is the extent of creativity. Every other tower is just a bland short platformer. And the sad part is, of all the games Ubisoft put towers in Watch Dogs, they could have done it the best if only they tried. Chicago is one of the biggest and most famous cities in the entire world. There are skyscrapers, interesting architectural features, and cool designs everywhere. Watch Dogs already has parkour ported straight from the Assassin's Creed games, just significantly simplified. Why not utilize all that verticality? If platforming is the key element of tower gameplay, why not refine it to make it more enjoyable? Aiden is a physical character. Just allow him to enter more skyscrapers, put towers on top of them, and let him climb them utilizing hacks to move objects around. Desmond already did all that minus the hacking part back in like Assassin's Creed 3 or something, so why not make it applicable to Watch Dogs? But enough rhetorical questions that never will be answered. Overall hacking system is not a failure, but a disappointment. Like, I get it, some people might like it, some might even find it fun, but the whole system lacks substance. For an allegedly a hacking game, hacking feels like a cheap gimmick. You could remove the hacking from the game entirely, and aside from a few campaign plot points, nothing would change. There's just no consequence to hacking, and it barely has any effect on the world or the story. And despite every second character being a god hacker, only Aiden has full access to all the features of hacking. There's a glimpse of what would happen if other characters could use it too. In the very last mission, Aiden has to avoid city OS hacks that Damien is throwing at him with full force. And it is enjoyable when all your weapons are turned against you. But again, it's the very last mission and it only happens once. Imagine if this happened more often. Imagine if T-Bone went mad and used City OS to hunt down Aiden. Or if Default actually lived up to his status as God Hacker and used the city against Aiden when he was being chased by him. So many cool, epic moments could have happened if only Aiden was actually challenged by someone on the same playing field. As it is now, hacking feels insanely lackluster. It's at best a secondary mechanic in a game designed to show it off. All of the features it has are either pointless, boring, inconsequential, or all of the above. But there is one feature that, despite lackluster design, still feels cool as hell: blackouts. Essentially, it's an EMP bomb, and it's awesome. Aiden can craft a blackout device or cause one by destroying a transformer in the street, and it's glorious, especially at night. Disabling all enemy communications, calls to the police, phone signals, city lights, buildings, and anything else that's connected to the grid. The confused enemies wandering around, streets only illuminated by car lights, and Aiden, almost invisible in the darkness, sneaking around like a predator stalking his prey. And it's not just a few blocks. The entire city is engulfed in the darkness. It's one of the few times you do actually feel powerful, like you got the whole city in the palm of your hand. The way light goes out with a bang, building after building, block after block, and then when it comes back in the same way, with buildings returning to life with a few flashes, is glorious. It's beautiful, and ironically enough, the blackouts have almost nothing to do with hacking. You can hack the transformer to cause a blackout, but that's about it. The blackout itself disables everything, including your hacks, so you're left with just your weapons and the darkness. It's truly amazing. While in the grand scheme of things, hacking doesn't feel all that special beyond blackouts, there's an area where Watch Dogs does shine. Graphical fidelity, the one aspect that was hyped in every single promotional video. That special area of game development where Watch Dogs was supposed to leave GTA 5 so far in the dust nobody would ever remember it. The most next-gen graphics to ever exist, then and forever. And one of the biggest disappointments and loudest scandals in gaming history. The prime example of overhyping and underdelivering. Graphics is the golden ticket to absolute stardom and sales chart domination that Ubisoft was banking on when developing and marketing Watch Dogs. And they almost so very nearly succeeded. Even with all the graphical downgrades, shortcomings, overhypes, and overpromises, Watch Dogs still looks amazing. Even 10 years after release, 95% of the time graphics are almost immaculate. Textures are not the highest resolution, but they're still sharp enough to never distract from the gameplay. Light and shadow effects are world-class. And the rain. Man, the rain is wetter than it is in real world. It's truly impressive what Ubisoft managed to cook up over all those years and for all that money. In fact, they went as far as to create an entire engine called Disrupt for the ground up specifically for Watch Dogs. And it shows. YouTube compression and the fact I recorded at 1440p won't do it justice. But believe me, the world of Watch Dogs is truly beautiful. Sure, you can spot less than ideal aspects of the world, such as pretty uniformly ugly grass, slightly washed out textures on the NPC skins and such, but for the most part, graphics are still at the highest level possible back in the day. Chicago looks absolutely amazing, and not only that, it feels like an actual living city. NPCs are going through scripted motions, but those motions are detailed in depth and lifelike. Cars driving around, characters walking all over the place, each with its unique walk and style of movement. People doing things like sweeping the dust or playing with a football. I mean, check this out. This dude even pulls out his phone to check something in it before returning to kicking his ball. It doesn't sound like much, and everything is of course scripted down to the most minute movement, but gives the NPCs an incredible feeling of actually being living, thinking beings. Beyond characters, the environment itself is incredible. Everything looks good, everything looks believable, and everything is enjoyable. Windswept streets, trash carried by the wind, the way the world shakes when the train is arriving, and the trees swaying in the wind with rays of sun shining through, all of that just makes Watch Dogs Chicago insanely enjoyable and pleasant to be in. The attention to details is stupid. In the mornings, there's a haze of smog and mist in the distance, realistically scattering the light around. Reflections of light on the surface of water flicker with the passing waves. Wind not only blows the clothes around, but it's actually carrying stuff like cans and paper wrappers. During rain, NPCs take out umbrellas, and sometimes even those are blown around by the wind. Weather and lighting are so important and so impressive. They fundamentally change the way you experience the world. You can walk down the same street at different weather conditions at different times of day and have completely different unique experiences. I mean, sure, I didn't say anything revolutionary, and every game that is weather and a day-night cycle looks different in different conditions. But in Watch Dogs, that is especially true in every different condition makes Chicago shine in an all-new way. And man, the rain is simply immaculate. Aiden will cover his face and wipe the rain away if he gets wind blowing in his face during a rainfall, His coat gets realistically wet and shimmers just like leather would in real life. There are puddles forming after a while, and rain even varies in intensity and rainfall direction based on the wind. Like seriously, the rain feels like an actual interactive object rather than just an effect overlay on your screen. It even interacts with light, with rays of light refracting in the droplets to produce realistic halo glow around light sources. It's almost insane how this 10-year-old game got the rain so incredibly right. But there are occasions where Watch Dogs stumbles in its visual fidelity. In the middle of the day, during the blinding sunshine when the skies are clear and the sun is straight up above, the world looks bland and unimpressive. It looks like it lacks depth, like there's nothing to it. It feels two-dimensional. Colors are desaturated. Everything is overwhelmed by the sunlight. But in some way, even this is attention to details. In real life, when the sun is shining and there's nothing obstructing the harsh light, the world also looks desaturated, lacking life and depth. I mean, check this clip. I shot it yesterday while taking a walk in the middle of the day. The entire world looks gray and boring, and it's all because of the harsh sunlight. It just drowns out every color. It kills every shade. Everything is gray or brown. Everything is boring. The only things that are left are shadows and flat, uninteresting, plain reality. So in that sense, while it doesn't look all too good, Watch Dogs is almost pure realism. Luckily, these specific conditions don't happen often. Absolute majority of the time, Watch Dogs shines like a diamond. Chicago might be small, but it's very dense with detail and care. In fact, Chicago in Watch Dogs is one of maybe 4 to 5 virtual worlds where it is genuinely enjoyable to just stop playing the game and instead just walk around, taking in all the atmosphere. In this manner, Chicago is on the same level as Night City from Cyberpunk, Toussaint and Skellige from The Witcher 3, Prague from Deus Ex Mankind divided in Paris from Assassin's Creed Unity. It's just incredible how appealing it looks. In comparison, GTA 5 looks almost cartoonish in how crude and unpolished it feels compared to Chicago. Even the GTA 5 Enhanced Edition that came out literally a few days ago as I'm editing this, that added stuff like ray tracing support, ambient occlusion, and global illumination still doesn't look as good as the original Watch Dogs on ultra settings. It's simply mind-blowing how well it aged and how sharp it still looks. If anything, Watch Dogs reminds me of Crysis. The mediocre gameplay is monstrously outshined by bleeding-edge graphical fidelity. And the best part is that if you don't feel like graphics lives up to the hype, you can easily mod Watch Dogs to insane extent. A decade of fan work and unusual for Ubisoft ease of modding resulted in thousands of mods. Everything from gameplay changes and unique skins and clothing sets for Aiden, to entire graphic overhauls and additional playable characters. Everything you'd ever want to have in Watch Dogs can be found in Nexus Mods or ModDB. The selection is vast, and some mods run incredibly deep. By spending 10 or 15 minutes downloading and setting up the right mod, you can transform Watch Dogs from simply a good-looking old game to a PC melting masterpiece of ultra-high resolutions and hyper-realism that can easily compete even with the best-looking games even today. Or let yourself experience the original Watch Dogs as was promised during that E3 promotion with one of many E3 restoration mods. Obviously, it's impossible to experience and describe every single mod in detail without dedicating your life purely to Watch Dogs, and I won't even attempt that here. But there are a few mods that I've tried and can recommend. Mods that not only improve upon everything that's good in Watch Dogs, but also solve many of the problems I mentioned in this video so far, including stuff like poor vehicle control and at times exceedingly boring gameplay. And they also make Watch Dogs shine like never before. The biggest and most important mod on this recommendation list is Watch Dogs, the Living City. To put it simply, it's almost a complete overhaul of Watch Dogs, completely transforming the game from an underdeveloped ambition to a fully fledged GTA 5 killer. It changes almost everything from the open world and inventory system to additional activities and completely new custom interaction. The open world is the main big selling point of this mod. While vanilla Watch Dogs, despite having a very detailed and enjoyable open world, doesn't actually do all that much with it beyond a few quick and boring side missions and few interactive activities. The Living City overhauls it almost from the ground up. There are now restricted zones on the map, guarded by enemies like you encounter during the campaign, except these are active and free roam outside of missions. For example, you can sneak inside a fixer hideout while chased by the cops, leading cops and fixers to fight each other, or summon cops there with an item, or just create some chaos by yourself and have a dynamic shootout. It's like gang hideouts, just more fun. The mod even adds stuff like unlocked interiors. Many building interiors that were previously enterable only during the missions are now always open and freely explorable in free roam. This means that you can enter and exit them at will, and some will even include the appropriate enemies inside. For example, you can revisit places like the auction or the stadium, or even enter the prison from the sliding doors of the main entrance. The most important unlocked interiors are conveniently marked on the main map as new unvisited city hotspots. So the world is immediately more alive and much more interesting to explore. Stadium in particular is one of the coolest looking locations that you originally only accessed in the very start of the game and couldn't explore. Now that problem is solved. The mod also brings races of various types available offline all around the city. All online races are now playable offline in a modified version to support CPU opponents, including boat races. All races require an entry fee based on the race rewards, which are based on the race difficulty. The difficulty affects the vehicle class, amount, and skill of the CPU opponents, besides the rewards and beyond predetermined difficulty. Every race can have randomized variations like a boss to take down or a sudden police chase. You're free to use hacks to get advantages or slow down and even destroy your opponents. At night, a helicopter will follow the racer in first place, shining its spotlight on him. There's even a new item of nitro added to the game to give you a need for speed like boost of speed. Maybe not the biggest change ever, but it immediately adds an interesting side activity to do in a world that was previously quite stale, and the randomly generating variation is also nice. Every time you race, you have a chance to have a completely new and unique experience. There are now random events that spawn out in the open world. Most of them include mini missions that you could choose to complete for rewards like money, experience, or reputation. You can stumble on these events in every district, and their frequency and variety depends on the area of the map you're in. You might find a special vehicle or pedestrian with a mission marker on him and can interact with it to start a special mission. These special missions are procedurally generated and repeatable and include tasks like hacking VIPs, killing bosses, hijacking loot trucks, assaulting prison transfers, and much more. Sometimes these missions even feature other characters, like Jordy. So while definitely non-canonical, it's at least an opportunity to interact with them outside of campaign missions. There are now much more varied and interesting hacks you can perform on regular civilians. In vanilla game, the civilian hacking boils down to stealing money and reading or listening to messages. But here, it's vastly improved. Now you can not only steal money from civilians, but also donate money to them for a reputation bonus. Or you can find a rare ultra-large account and siphon tens of thousands of dollars, or find a civilian hacking which immediately gives several system keys, as opposed to one in the vanilla game, allowing for much faster item crafting. Aside from all that, there's now a chance to be ambushed. The ambush is a feature that was developed by Ubisoft and was fully functional at some point of the game development. It was later effectively disabled from the final game. Fortunately, Ubisoft didn't bother to completely remove it, so part of its content and resources are still in the files. The mod restores them. After the first few missions of the campaign, you'll be warned about a breach in the communication system. Hostile hackers breached the Fixer Contracts network and can now create fake contracts to ambush you and try to kill you when you go to the contract points to accept them. If you manage to survive, you'll be rewarded with an appropriate amount of money and experience. This alone creates an insanely enjoyable dynamic experience with a surprise element, and it works wonders in Watch Dogs. There are now 15 more fast travel points, allowing you to reach your destination faster. Instead of being able to fast travel to safe houses, you can now fast travel directly to unlocked City OS towers, meaning less time wasted driving around pointlessly. One of the biggest gameplay changes is the limited weapon inventory. In a vanilla game, the amount of weapons is unlimited, so you always carry dozens of weapons at the same time, and considering most of the time you're using Silence Pistol, the majority of weapons are completely unused. Now with this optional bonus script, the 4 weapon slots of your inventory hold only 1 weapon each, instead of every single weapon of their category. This means that now you can take with you only 4 weapons at a time, 1 for each type. 1 pistol, 1 automatic weapon like a rifle or a machine gun, 1 sniper or launcher, and 1 shotgun. Being forced to not have the entirety of your arsenal always with you gives more strategic value to your loadout choice, making it more rewarding. There's an actual tactical consideration now to weapon selection. You must think wisely about which weapons to buy depending on the task, and being ill-equipped for the situation presents new interesting challenges, making the game overall much more enjoyable. You aren't a walking arsenal anymore. To accommodate for this new inventory system, now every single weapon is always available in gun shops, so you don't need to first unlock them anymore. Because of this, and because of the many new ways to gain money, the weapon prices have been rebalanced, with the most unique weapons now very expensive, but in turn that makes money actually worth something. In vanilla game, guns were cheap, and after an hour or two, money lost all meaning. But here, money management is significantly more important, and money has much more meaning for much longer. There are also new weapons added, such as exclusive MP412. There's now an armory and hideouts that allows weapon switching. So there's an actual reason to interact with hideouts beyond just pure fast travel to them from the map. Pawn shops have been tweaked too, and they now also sell the system keys crafting component, so you don't necessarily have to find them on civilians anymore. Overall, this is a very welcome change, making Aiden much less powerful and much more limited in combat, enforcing tactical thinking and preparation over blindly jumping into combat. To compensate for limited inventory, there are new craftable items added, such as the Hunter Turret, Bodyguards, Personal Summonable Taxi Driver that works just like Taxi does in GTA games, Sticky Camera that allows you to place a hackable camera basically anywhere you want and hack in unreachable areas. You can also summon a black market dealer. He'll park in a nearby alley or other secluded location and wait for you with the back of his vehicle filled with guns, and he sells pretty much any kind of weapon. But beyond just being a traveling salesman, he's also a criminal, so he'll flee at the first sign of cops nearby and will offer discounts if your reputation is bad. He also offers armory services, so you can switch weapons without going to hideouts and can customize your loadout for every single mission if you wish so. One of the more interesting new items is the ability to call the police. This item that you can buy or craft allows you to call for a patrol cop vehicle to your current location. Once arrived, the cops will dismount the vehicle and patrol the nearby area for a while searching for criminal activity. In case they spot any criminal activity, they'll engage in combat against the enemies. So you could just summon them and have them fight your enemies for you, while you sneak around undetected. Cops under fire might even decide to call for SWAT reinforcements, which will immediately drive to the scene and join the fight. Most of these items are balanced, so they can't be used during campaign missions. But during the plethora of open-world activities, they add incredible amounts of immersion and complexity, making the game significantly more dynamic and enjoyable. And that's just the big changes. Living City also includes hundreds of smaller adjustments, like bug fixes, changes to animations, tweaks tweaks to police systems like enabling police to actually use hacks against you during chases and content restoration. It really lives up to the name. Chicago is much more alive and feels like an actual city after all the fixes, adjustments, and additions. It's simply amazing how much stuff gets fixed and improved with this mod. It eliminates almost every single bad aspect of the vanilla game. Aside from Living City, there's another, even more extreme mod to consider. Watch Dogs Rebirth. It's an even bigger overhaul of the base game. Although it might be a bit misleading to call Rebirth a mod. Rather, it's a whole collection of some of the highest rated and most popular Watch Dogs mods so far. It actually features the Living City as part of its collection, but it also adds so much more, such as custom animations, adjustments and tweaks to vehicles and traffic, quality of life changes like depth of field and camera adjustments, mouse acceleration fixes, and most importantly, a vast improvement to graphics. Even though vanilla Watch Dogs doesn't look bad, Watch Dogs Rebirth is like a layer of super reality overlaid on top of the base game. It improves everything from resolutions to lighting and reflections. It makes Watch Dogs look like a next-gen game, even in 2025. Textures seem to be in higher resolutions. Color palette is adjusted so the world looks darker now, but much more realistic, and there's much deeper contrast between dark and white colors, bringing much more attention to the immaculate lighting system and the way light illuminates surfaces in the dark. Reflections are particularly impressive. Reflections on buildings, puddles of water, or windows are literally flawless. I mean, check out this car. It's just me driving on the road under the metro rail bridge. The reflections on this car are not only smooth as hell, but they're so goddamn accurate, it's almost unbelievable. Every single detail is reflected in a perfectly realistic and believable way. Every ray of light follows every curve of the glass, shaping and deforming light in highly realistic fashion. And not only the bridge itself, but surrounding elements like buildings are also perfectly reflected and deformed. The same applies to reflections on the water in the wet streets. Sure, when you boil it down, it's just your regular artificial realism, where adding as much reflections as possible counts as good graphics. But in Rebirth, the reflections are balanced perfectly, and they're so incredibly enjoyable to look at. And none of this is explicitly ray traced, which is even more impressive. And considering all other elements Rebirth adds, including stuff like restoring user interface to that original E3 2012 style, it's basically the definitive way to experience Watch Dogs. Definitely recommend checking it out. So there you have it, a long and winded story of Watch Dogs, 2 mods, and a whole lot of unrealized potential. And it's obvious Ubisoft had it in them to make something truly great, as evidenced by the abundance of leftover files and materials. But at least the modding community is here to finish their work. So buy it, mod it, and play it, and savor every moment. Watch Dogs franchise might be dead now, but with the very first game they shot for the moon, and while they missed it, modders eventually got it there, and now it hails as one of the best games Ubisoft ever made, and the best example of what future of gaming could have looked like if greed, overzealous ambitions, and limitations of technology didn't choke it in its first step.